Hello, welcome to, what is this, week 3. So we're in module 2 for the elementary writing class. And I'm back here in my classroom, which is pretty great because we started teaching in person this week. And it's been exhausting. And now it's Saturday and I'm in school on Saturday. But that's mostly because my house is noisy with my family. So this was the quiet place I could go. This week, we're talking about setting up our writing classrooms. But before we do that, I do have some announcements, reminders, how to do things, whatever. I've been getting numerous emails with questions, which is great. I want you guys to feel like you can always email me and ask me questions. There are a few that are like recurring questions that I thought maybe would be best to address kind of whole group, since this is the only whole group forum I kind of have. I do want to talk about due dates. So make sure that you are paying attention to those. If it says midnight, midnight actually starts, right? Like, so tonight at midnight, it won't be September 12 anymore. Midnight changes it to the 13th. So if it says Sunday at midnight, that really means it needs to be in Saturday night, right? So be sure that you're paying attention to that. A lot of the time, the reasoning for that is it gives me a day of my weekend to head start looking over some of the stuff that you guys turn in, and as well as set up my interview with whomever I'm interviewing that week with your questions. And having you all turn it in on Monday means I wouldn't probably have time to look at it until Friday again. So that gives me a little leeway for looking at things. So I want to kind of go, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through our e-learning space for those of you who still might be confused as to where to find some stuff. And hopefully I'll be able to clear up some confusion. So I'm going to go out of my thing here. And you can see all my tabs up there. It's actually good today. Okay, so this is, if you're in e-learning, this is our landing spot, our home. There's a picture of me looking very tired with Matt De La Pena because it had been a long day at that conference. Okay, so if you go to content here, content will bring you here. We're in module 1 still. You can go to the course schedule. That will show you the stuff that I have coming up that will be due. Response 3 here, I don't have live yet because it's for this week. Why is this happening to me? Go away. Quit. Yes. Sorry about that. So course information and documents. This is where you find our syllabus, but this is also where assignments are explained on this assignment sheet. It might be helpful to print that if you have access to printing. And then our schedule here, I revised and updated it already once because, things happen. This tells you what's due. So like right now, tomorrow is September 13th. Tonight at midnight is September 13th. So hopefully by the time you watch this, you'll have done these things. While we are kind of still all getting used to it, I've been giving grace. I'm not usually one to take late stuff, but I've been giving a little bit of grace since this is a really weird way to take college courses. So I've been trying to give a little bit of leeway. So like due today, before I go to bed, if I was in the class, I would want to make sure, only 2 people had to do articles of the week, and I did one of them for you, like as the teacher, I did one. And then there's already one there. So that's taken care of. The rest of you don't have anything to do for that. That's due, tonight. Submit your questions for Dr. Slanger, read chapter 1 and do the response for it. And then create a list of memories in your notebook. That's all you had to do for today. Next week, and when I say today, I mean the Saturday that I'm living in right now. You'll watch this probably after that's been due. So we're starting week 3. When you're watching this currently, this is where we are right here in week 3. So some of you have already done a response to my article of the week that I posted, but Maylee also posted one. So you want to make sure to go back in and check, and I'll show you that in a second as well, and make sure you have a response to both of them. And then there's 2 people signed up for articles of the week 3 and 4. So those 2 people will want to get theirs up at some point this week. I put by the 16th, but honestly, you can have until the 20th as well because nobody needs to respond to you. And I'm posting Tanya's Mrs. Harbottle's interview, and I'll show you where to respond to that. This week you'll have 3 to 4 questions for Bethany DeGraff. She's a first grade teacher, and I'll show you where you'll find that. And then this week we're reading chapter 2 and doing a response. Again, that response won't be available for me to show you right now because it will go live, but after you watch this, you'll be able to go down and do that. And then I'll explain this. So this is what's due by the 20th, which is, Saturday night, basically, because the 20th is a Sunday. So hopefully this kind of can help you keep track of what's doing. I even made you little check boxes because that's how I roll. So that's kind of how you can see where our due dates are. So that's under the course information and documents. And then also in the course information documents, like I said, there's an assignment sheet here this shows you how much all of the things that we're doing in class are worth. And then it gives you a short little blurb about what it is we're doing. So hopefully that will help. And then our syllabus is also in there. So if we go back to table of contents, we had intro to elementary writing was our first week. This past week, the one that is, as you're watching this, it is over, was module 1 here. And I have my video. And module 2 that I'm recording right now will look similar to this. It'll say module 2. I recommend watching the video before you move on because I've got a few emails this week that ask questions that were answered in this video. So I definitely recommend doing that first. Reading response number 3 I'll list here. I always give you as well the slideshow that I'm doing. And your guest speaker question 3 will be here. Anything that you have to do right here will be here. Discussion boards. Okay, so article of the week. And for the guest speaker, when you watch Mrs. Harbottle, you're going to go up here to communications. Most of you found the discussion boards, but I want to show you where they are. So you go up to communications, hit discussions, and this is our discussion list. So this is where they'll be found. I have I guess I have a few things in here. So we have articles of the week is one of our discussion boards. Guest speaker responses is a discussion board. And then there's a problem solver one. This is where these are kind of for you all to talk amongst yourselves, I guess. Problem solver, if it's something that you want to ask your classmates about, you can post it in here. Student lounge is sort of where you can, have side discussions that could come up, any book recommendations, anything you want to do to interact. I'm not grading anything that's in here. That's all kind of you guys. These are the 2 where I'm going to be taking grades for. So article of the week, this is the first one. You'll notice there's one topic already under here. So the topic under here now is article of the week number 1 and 2. I think when you go and look now, there will be a second topic that says articles of the week 3 and 4. But right now, as I'm showing you, there's just numbers 1 and 2. So article of the week 1 is right here. This is the one that I posted that I wanted you to read. So this kind of shows you, I read the article Writer's Notebook, A Place to Dream, Wonder, and Explore. And I talked to you guys a little bit about why I picked that particular topic. I summarized it a little bit here. I talked about what I thought about the article and some of my experiences with it here. And then I posed a question to the class. Well, I posed a few questions here. And then you'll see down here, all these people have already responded, which is what they're supposed to do. And I love how Catherine here didn't just do her response, but she was read through other people's and responded to that. That's not, I haven't officially made that like part of the grade, but it makes the class a lot better if you guys are talking with each other. So that is cool. So quite a few people here have already posted their responses. So that's awesome. If I go back to topic, because the whole topic is articles 1 and 2, and we go to article of the week number 2, beyond the classroom, the protective role of student-teacher relationships on parenting stress. Grace posted this one. She did a very nice job here. So you'll read all about her article here that she read, like why she chose it. And Maylee and Brittany and Catherine have already responded to hers. So you want to make sure you respond both to Grace's and to mine when you go in to do this. And then if you are to go there right now to the topic, you will also be able to click on articles of the week. There will be another, let's see, right under here we have articles of the week 1 and 2. There will also be one now that says articles of the week 3 and 4, but only those 2 people who signed up for that week have to post theirs. Everybody else is just responsible for responding. I hope that makes sense. So that's what we're doing for articles of the week. For the guest speakers, I haven't posted the guest speaker yet. I'll probably post that in module 2. And I'm hoping to also put the link in here. So this is Mrs. Harbottle. You haven't watched it yet, but when you do this week, you'll click on Mrs. Harbottle. And Elizabeth put her questions here because the form wasn't working for her. Normally you just use the form. But so this is where you will put your response. I gave you some things to think about. She answered your questions. What did you notice or wonder about what she talked about? Anything surprising to you? Anything that challenged your thinking that you maybe disagree with or hadn't thought of before? Maybe you have new questions now. And then please be sure to engage with at least 2 of your classmates. So down here, you'll start a new thread and you'll type what you thought about Mrs. Harbottle's interview and post it. And then you can start reading each other's as you go too. So make sure you come back throughout the week to check to see what other people thought and see if anybody agrees or disagrees with you. So that is where you'll find those 2 boards. I'm hoping that makes more sense. I'm noticing that a lot of people found how to do the reading response. So I put the reading response here. And you read, okay, I'm supposed to read chapter 2, read it, choose one of these prompts. And then once you've typed it up, like you can type it up in Word, you go to assessments, Dropbox. I think mine's going to look differently than yours because I'm not a student. But this is where you will, mine looks different because it's the teacher view here. But this is where you will go to, you know what? I think I can show you. I think I can show you, for instance. Okay, so this is the grad class I'm teaching right now. If I go to the Dropbox in here, this is what it looks like from the student view. So this is my student Dropbox. These are my assignments that I have to do for that class. And this is where I clicked on this because I had to put in a behavior log here. clicked on this. I have a file submitted already, so I don't actually have to, but this I would put add a file, and then I would choose it from my computer or wherever I'm adding it from and hit submit. I actually already did my homework for the week. Thank you very much. See, one submission, one file. I did my homework. Gold star for me. But that is where you find the things for our class for turning things in. If any of that did not make sense, if I'm rambly and weird, please send me an email and tell me, Mrs. Slater, or Professor Slater, you're rambly and weird, and I will try to clarify. All right, so I'm going to close out of that, and we'll go back to what we're doing. So hopefully I've made that clear. Okay, so this week, under Module 2, you will read and respond to the 2 articles of the week if you haven't already. Bailey and Haley will share articles of the week 3 and 4 at some point in that discussion board. You'll watch your interview with Mrs. Tanya Harbottle. You guys had amazing questions, and we ran out of time because we were like, she's like, well, you don't want them to give them a 6-hour TED Talk? And I was like, I think they would hate me. So I didn't get to all of your questions, but I really found them super interesting. But I did get to a lot, and some of them are similar. So hopefully you had some questions answered and you learned some things. Chapter 2 in The Writing Thief, and then response number 3 to the Dropbox. This chapter is on using mentor texts to help kids write, and I'm going to show you a couple examples of that in today's lecture. 3 to 4 questions from Mrs. Bethany DeGraff. You find that in Module 2 as well. And then you're going to be choosing... You should have made a list in your own writing notebook, and I think my writing notebook is over there at the front of the classroom, because of course that's where it is. But this is what I've been using for this class. So you will have made a list of memories that you have of writing in elementary school through, you can go all the way through high school if you want. Remember I showed you mine. So now you're going to go through and you're going to pick, okay, which ones do I remember well enough that I could write like a good paragraph about? And you're going to choose, at least 2 of these from yours to write out in a paragraph, thinking about, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? What did it feel like the teacher was doing? You can even think about your 5 senses memories and write from there, just kind of expanding, because this is what writers do to expand their thinking. And I will show you the example that I did with my 8th graders this week as we go through the lecture. So let's start the lecture. I'm going to address ways to set up writing in the elementary and middle school classroom. I'll give examples of what writing time in grades K-8 might look like. I'm going to show some examples of using mentor texts with my own students. And honestly, I did not do the Common Core State Standards just yet, but I am going to be providing a link to those if you do not know how to get to them, so that you can read through what those look like. Really, they line up right with some of these best practice things. So the first thing when you are setting up writing in your classroom is that you need to have regular, dedicated time to writing. This is backed up by all of the research since the early 80s, 1980s. I will provide you with a link to this slideshow where I put all of my sources in the notes, which is what the little asterisks are for. But this is what it is. Research recommends that elementary teachers spend at least 1 hour daily to writing, and that's not even including the writing that you would do with other content subjects, like the writing you do with social studies or science or reading or anything else. They recommend 1 dedicated hour just to bettering kids' writing. And half of that time should be spent teaching and working with kids on new skills and building up the skills they already know. And the other half should be given to students to actually practice the writing process. So it's been proven also that this routine writing doesn't have just a positive impact on student writing, but it also helps on their own reading comprehension. Reading and writing are linked in the brain because the more you read, the better you're going to write because because the brain is being exposed to more vocabulary, more varied sentence structures, different ways that authors do things. So the more variety you read, the better your writing is going to be because you will have had access to knowing what that looks like. You build your prior knowledge. The inverse is also true. The more writing that students do, the more they put their thoughts on paper, the better they become at reading comprehension by default. So it's really important to integrate them, in my opinion. I know that some schools have writing and reading, and they try to keep them separate. And in my opinion, and I think this is pretty backed by research from what I've read, that's detrimental. It's better to integrate writing into everything and reading into everything that you do. In my 8th grade class, personally, I have 5 8th grade classes throughout the day. They're each about 55 minutes in length. I dedicate a minimum of 15 minutes per hour to writing. So what that looks like, for instance, is this week in my class, we had 4 class days? Yes, because Monday was Labor Day. So we had 4 in-class days this week. It was our first week in person. And every day when they came in, the bell work that I had on the board was doing something in their writing notebooks. On the first day of school, I made sure everybody had a notebook that they could use just for my class that wasn't also going to have math homework in it and science notes and whatever. It was just going to be for English class. And I had them writing things down. I have them keep notes about writing in there. I have them, anything that we talk about with grammar or usage, I have them keep in their writing notebooks because that way they can always flip through and see brainstorming and planning. All of the different little mini lessons and stuff will always all be in one place for them that way. And as we go through and when we talk about mentor texts in a second, I'll show you what I did with them this week to get them to write about their names. But it's really important that you dedicate time to it in class. The second thing is that you want to build a community of writers in your class. It shouldn't just be, okay, now I'm going to teach you writing and you're going to practice writing. It's that writing is inherently social. This is also research-based. It's been found that writing is a social activity for students because it's so close to what students do when they verbalize their thinking. So writing and verbalization of thinking are linked in our minds as being the same. Working through problems either out loud or in writing do the same thing. So it makes it very social for students. So instead of old school, kids in rows writing a theme or whatever, was not best practice because students weren't able to go through the writing process in a social manner. So the first thing that you need to do is build a positive classroom environment. Your activities need to be engaging. Support students while encouraging independence. So you want to get them to do the work on their own, but you also don't want them to feel like helpless when they get stuck. So we'll kind of go into what that looks like later. You want to build an enthusiasm for writing in the room. Even if you've never had an enthusiasm for writing, you could maybe look at this course that we're doing as a place to try to find that enthusiasm back. And then, of course, the encouragement to keep trying should always be part of not, well, yeah, you're right, you're not good at this. You would never want to shut a kid down. The second thing to building writing communities is to give opportunities for students to collaboratively develop their writing. In elementary school, this often will look like paired writing, where two students will decide on a topic and they will write it together. That way they're using their verbal planning and communication, but they're also putting it down in writing. And so collaborate, and for me, I don't do a lot of authentic writing that isn't collaborative in my life. As a teacher, oftentimes, if I'm asked to present about something, it's collaboratively with someone else. In my grad work, if I'm writing, I don't write in solidarity very often. The chapters that I've had published or the articles I've had published have all been, some of them have been, I've been the solo writer, but rarely have I done it in complete isolation without input from others, or calling up friends and talking over ideas before I put them down. And so, since those are things that I do as a writer, I try to teach my students that that's all part of writing, even though there's no pencil in your hand, or even though you don't have your Chromebook open. Talking about what you could write or talking about your ideas is still part of the writing process. So you want to keep that open. It can also be in the form of small group and whole group discussions. Again, using that verbalization first. Once kids are brimming with ideas, they usually take to writing much easier. Jessica Minahan, I think I mentioned this before. Jessica Minahan is a expert on students with anxiety, and the number one thing that tasks students avoid with it when they have anxiety is usually writing, and it's usually because it's such a daunting thing to think about the product and not just say, well, let's talk about some ideas. When you need to show students, because it's very daunting to think, I'm going to write a whole essay, for older students, or I need to write a story for younger students. Whereas, well, let's just talk about some ideas. Like, talking takes away some of that stress, because kids can do that. They can talk about their ideas. And then that builds the confidence for them to write about it. And then lastly, we need to teach students to give and receive feedback. This can look like writing centers or peer conferencing. If we were meeting together in a class, in an area where we are all physically together, I would be doing my best to build a positive classroom environment and give all of you opportunities to work collaboratively on writing things. And then I would also be trying to show you how to do writing centers for older students. Older students can do these writing centers where they end up peer conferencing with each other. I feel like a lot of my colleagues fall into this habit of doing the first two things on this list very well. They have a positive writing environment. People are working collaboratively. But when it comes to giving and receiving feedback, they give their students an editing checklist. And I taught my students how to revise and edit. But that's not how we do it in real life. When I wrote my chapter for this book that's coming out at the end of the month, I didn't ask my other academic friends to please look at this, and they didn't just hand me a checklist like, okay, did you capitalize everything? Did you cite your sources? I mean, of course, those are the things that I'm going to ask them to look for, but I also want their feedback on how I could make it better. So we need to teach students how to do that. And that also goes back to the dedicated time. We need to teach students how to look at a piece of writing. And we're going to do this together, because as teachers, this is what we do. We look at writing and give feedback to students, but we want them to be able to do that as well. So one of our modules will focus entirely on reading student work and giving feedback. And a lot of the things that we will do as adults, as teachers looking at students, you can teach students to do that with each other. And then also teaching students to accept the feedback as helpful and not as this like criticism of they did something wrong. So writing communities are positive, they're collaborative, and they work with each other. The students do everything with each other. And I've seen this from kindergarten writing centers all the way up into my grad classes. So I know it can be done at most levels. All right, using resources and tools to support writing, also super important when you're setting up writing in your classroom. You want to provide access to a variety of rich reading materials because reading materials are what we want our students to write, something that is going to be read. So you guys are going to, I say you guys too much, but y'all are going to be doing Reading and the Writing Thief this week. And I don't know where I set my book. Oh, there it is. Your whole chapter this week is on mentor texts. And I love using mentor texts. It's almost a little bit, my students are like, they tell me that I almost get a little out of control with it. But I will show you what I did this week after I finish this. And then modeling with the students. You want to tap into students' existing knowledge. Kid writing is something that's like picture-based, right? So I think one of you asked about, or it was maybe in your response to writing notebooks, but like the drawing of pictures when kids are too young to still write out full words, that is absolutely part of the writing process. So my kindergarten student, or child, Alice, my daughter, they have writing notebooks. She had a writing notebook in preschool, and many of it was drawing pictures and putting letters. What sound? Who did you draw today? That's mom. Okay. What does your mom do? Oh, what kinds of things do you do with your mom? And they verbalize it and they explain the picture. Those are the beginnings of writing, is for students to be able to draw a picture and tell you the story about that. Or if you ask, okay, we are going to today draw what we think is the best pet ever. So students all draw the best pet ever, and then they talk to a partner or the teacher or the full class about why that pet they drew is the best ever. And boom, you're doing argumentative writing. It's just verbal, but they're doing it by drawing their picture and explaining why it's the best. So kid writing is absolutely a way to get the younger children into writing. And then choice. You want kids to talk about what they know, write about what they know, write about something that interests them, that they have background knowledge in. Gone are the days where you assign a full class to everybody is going to write about, the War of 1812 and its repercussions. Nobody does that anymore because it's bad practice. It is not good practice to assign the same exact everything to all of your students and just assume that they want to write about it because they want to get a good grade and do well. That's not how it works anymore. It never really did work that way, but teachers did it anyway. So we want to be leaning on their choice and their interests. And then we also want to use a range of technology, digital tools and platforms like Google Classroom, Seesaw, Doodle Buddy. Two of my kids at home post things on Google Classroom and turn things in there. On their iPads that they have for school, they have the Seesaw and Doodle Buddy apps where they create and write that way. There are a million other things older kids can use, like Weebly or Google Sites or, even just Google Docs, because you can make those collaborative as I've used with you. So those are all kinds of things that it's been shown that when we use and teach students 21st century writing tools, they produce better writing because that is real writing to them and in the world. It's just that's how writing really works. So it's important to use a variety of tools. I use both notebooks and Chromebooks with my 8th graders. Okay, so writing for authentic audiences and purposes is another part of creating a writing classroom. The teacher, writing specifically for the teacher to read it and no one else, is not an authentic audience. No matter how awesome we feel like we are as the audience, we are not it. We are not the authentic audience for our students. And the purpose for writing cannot be just completion of an assignment. If students say, why are we writing this? You can't say, because you have to write an informational essay. They're not going to care. Their motivation, which we'll talk about in another module, is going to go down the tubes, and they're not going to care about it. They have to have an audience and a purpose that they care about. Sometimes that looks like physical publication. I put a few pictures on here of things that I've seen that I like. Obviously, elementary teachers always are super creative with their bulletin boards and hanging things up or like putting things out on tables for people to read. My kids' elementary school is just as awesome. But even at the middle school level here, we have bulletin boards in the hallway. One is we do a 100-word memoir, but we use the mentor text of Humans of New York. And our students read some Humans of New York things, posts with pictures, and then they create their own, but they are, the difference is we constrain them to just 100 words. So they have to use 100 words to tell a story, and they can use an actual photo, or they can use, find a photo on the internet, but they make it look like an Instagram post. And we post them in the hallway with the title of Humans of Wyoming Junior High. And they all have personal writing, little narratives that they've written about themselves or their lives and their experiences. And they all look like teeny tiny Instagram posts. So they're writing for a real audience. I often will have students take over my Instagram, my teacher Instagram, Mrs. Slider, and post what we're doing for the day so that they can go on and look at it and see it from a student point of view. It can also be reading aloud. The student is reading aloud, sharing in small groups, knowing that somebody else is going to hear what you're writing does a lot for you as a writer and makes you care more about what people hear. So, I want to go backwards because I want to show you a few things from this week before I close. So I'm going to close out of here and I'm going to go into this. This is every week I create a slideshow for my students that goes on my Clever Touch board so that they can see our agenda and they can see our learning targets. And then I post this in our Google Classroom so that they have access to it. This is from my first day of school. We started the school year talking about names and the names of things and who names things. Where do names come from? Who gets to name things? Who doesn't get to name things? And our whole first unit is narrative and listening to people whose voices are heard and whose have been silenced and figuring those things out. So we start with our names. And we talk about naming traditions, Vietnam, Cambodia, Mexico. These are all linked for kids if they want to research it further. I share the book Alma and how she got her name with the students. It's a children's book. I read it. It's about a little girl with a super long name, and her dad goes through and tells her who in the family had each of those names that they assigned to her and what they were like, and she makes connections to herself. And then I hand out a packet of mentor texts. This one is a narrative about an African American man who decided to change his name from Johnny to Bakari Chavnu. This one is about Marge Piercy writes a poem about her name and how Marge doesn't sound like a poet's name. And then I also have a student sample who did a name poem similar to Marge Piercy's that they read. And then my name from the book House on Mango Street, which is the first vignette in that book. So we read all of those. Then we talk about what tone is and how you identify tone, and how does each writer, talk about their name? What kinds of things did they talk about? Some talk about the definition of their name. Some talk about the sound or how it feels in your mouth. Some talk about where they got their name, all the different things that we could talk about names. Lines we loved. We really pick apart our mentor texts, things that we liked. And then we talk about, if we're going to do this ourselves, what do we want to write about? So we is there a story behind your first name? Who chose it for you? Why was it chosen? Anything that you associate with your name. I had one student in class raise his hand. His name was Chase, and he said, everybody who ever meets me, every single teacher on the first day today has said, oh, Chase is on the case. For those of you who don't have small children, that's from Paw Patrol. And he hates it. And I'm like, write that down. Write down, Chase is on the case, Paw Patrol, I hate it. Because that's something associated with your name. Any history of last name, feeling of connection to ancestors, how your name represents and reflects who you are. And then the next day, so we spent 15 minutes. I gave him 15 minutes to write about that. And then the next day, this was the next day, I said, keep on writing. I gave him 15 more minutes to continue writing about their name and to kind of start picking out what they wanted. And I showed them my writing notebook, which is way at the front of my classroom. So I'm not going to go get it right now. But I did the assignment with them. I modeled it. I showed them mine before I turned them loose working. And then I walked around. And this day I read a children's book called The Name Jar, which is about a little girl who moves here from Korea, whose name is hard to say. And so she thinks she wants to change it. But then she learns that her name means grace in English, and she learns a few other things. And so we talk about, where our names come from there. So students write some more. And then I do something called the forum that I introduce with names. And eventually in the school year, when I say circle up for the forum, everybody stands in a circle around the classroom. But as I tell my students, we don't really know each other like that yet. So I just paired them in a mini forum. The mini forum is that they are going to read what they wrote to each other and and have a discussion, talk about your names. And if anything comes to mind while you're talking in your mini forum, jot it down as something that you want to add. And then the next day we went into Google Classroom and the students typed out what they had and they turned it in. It was a mini cycle of the writer's process. It included all of the things with choice and building up. And I was walking around and, can I share this with you? And even kids who right away in the first day, they'd say, oh, they'd turn to somebody else and they'd say, have so-and-so read theirs. Theirs is cool. So they were already starting to get used to this idea that we write all the time. We give you lots of resources, mentor texts, show you what we're doing, pick it apart and talk about it before then having you all do it. Later in the week, we read Raised by Women by Kelly Norman Ellis, which is a poem. And then students after that reflected on, we read 3 student samples after her, and they started a list of things about themselves for Raised by. And then on, yesterday, Friday, we made a list. Well, what do all of these 4 poems have in common that we can say that they are all similar? Like if we wanted to write a Raised by poem, what should it include? And I had them put this in their notebook. And next week, we will be writing those Raised by poems. A couple great resources. Linda Christensen wrote Reading, Writing, and Rising Up, this book. And she also wrote Teaching for Joy and Justice, which is this book. These are great for upper elementary and into high school. because she gives mentor texts and things to her students, and she gives lesson plans for how she presented those to students and what they talked about, and then setting them loose, writing on their own. Another great book, if you're interested in the writing workshop, Nancy Atwell in the middle. This is geared for middle school teachers, but I think it can be applied to lower grades and up to secondary or to high school grades. So this one by Nancy Atwell in the middle has great reading and writing workshop information in it. So those are things that I think could possibly be helpful. So to wrap up, because this has gotten long and I'm sorry. Once again, these are your assignments for this week, what you should be doing. I'm hoping that you'll enjoy listening to Tanya. She's funny, and she loves her job dearly, and she's incredibly educated about the Chicago Public School and policies and laws surrounding special ed and inclusion and everything. So she's a rich resource, and so I hope you enjoy listening to her speak. As usual, if you have questions, please ask. But I ask that you please look through your resources on e-learning first before you email me, and then email me, and I will be happy to help you out. So any questions, email me. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a great week.